Hi, back again. Um, so today we have got something pretty fun and pretty cool because today we're talking about all of us. Yes, we're talking about resource markets. So if you remember the circular flow model, then you will remember that the product market, which is what we've been talking about, demand and supply up until this point, and that's where businesses contribute into that and we purchase from them. Well, this is the bottom part of the circular flow model, which is the resource market. This is where we bring our resources to put into it and the businesses purchase from us. So we're going to flip things around a little bit and see how that works. And I think you'll enjoy it. And there's even a little life coaching in here for you. And I don't charge any extra for that, okay? I don't charge extra for life coaching, so no need to get your wallets out. All right, so let's take a look at what's going on in the resource markets. All right, probably won't be as much fun as the office space stuff, but still fun nevertheless. So looking at resource markets. Resource markets, now the biggest difference between resource markets and product markets is the composition, what makes up demand and supply. So demand in the product market, what we've been talking about so far is we, the consumers, are the demanders. So we're the ones demanding the products, and businesses are the suppliers. Well, that's flippy-flopped in the resource market. So for demand, those are the businesses or the employers. Businesses and employers, they are the ones that demand. They are demanding the resources, the labor, the capital, all that stuff. And supply, well, that's us. We are the ones supplying all the resources. So that's the households or employees, however you want to, whatever helps you remember it the most. So we're supplying the resources and they're demanding it. And that's the biggest difference between the resource markets and the product markets. All right, great. We can all go home. Just kidding. There's more to it than that, but that's a good start. Okay. So first we're going to talk about, there's a couple of understood facts that I want to just start us off with. The first one is that producers continue to demand as long as their marginal revenue is greater than their marginal cost. Now remember that marginal revenue, that's the revenue, what the money you make by adding one additional unit. So if you add one additional employee, how much money is that employee going to make you? That's the marginal revenue. The marginal cost is the cost associated with adding one additional unit. So if you add one additional employee, how much is that going to cost you? And the most obvious answer is, of course, what you pay them, their wages. And there may be more to it than that, depending on, the employee and the job and those types of things. But for right now, first, so to say that producers, as long as marginal revenue, so if their revenue is greater than their cost of hiring you, if you're bringing in more money than they're paying out to hire you, they're going to keep hiring. Okay, so they're going to keep hiring employees as long as this is true, that the employees are making them more money than they're costing them. Now for us on the supply side, so this is on the demand side, on the supply side for us individuals, we supply our resources to the highest bidder. And of course, I'm going to in ceteris paribus there, because there may be instances where that's not true, but for the most part, we do. We want to look for who's going to pay us the most. And think about it, when you're looking for a job, if you've got two that you're looking at, one of the things you're going to look at is how much are they paying, right? How much are they going to pay me? And that's going to be a big influencer in which job you take. All right, so those are just some facts there. So let's take a moment and look at the labor market graph. How does this translate to a graph? So the labor market, And it looks something like this. So you'll have your labor market there. And we're going to have over here now the price of labor. The price of labor, and I put an L there for labor, so that's an L. Let's put a capital L so you can see it. The price of labor, this equals wages. So this is whatever that person is being paid in wages, that is the price of labor. If you want to buy some labor, it's called wages. That's what you pay. And then the quantity of labor, and that's the hours worked. Or you could measure it, you're writing the graph, you can measure it in days worked, or whatever, however you want to do it, months, years. Years is a little too long to discuss, but we're going to say hours for right now. All right, so the hours worked. So you have you have your typical like that. So you have a demand for labor and a supply of labor. All right, so you have a demand and a supply curve, same as the product market. And right here, of course, you will have in the middle where they cross an equilibrium right there. And the equilibrium on this side is going to be your equilibrium wage. And down here, you're going to have your equilibrium quantity. Right. So whenever you hear about a wage saying this is the wage that the market will bear, or this is the going rate for that job, this is where it comes from. There's a supply and demand, there's a labor market graph for each job, and each one it comes up with supply and demand where it intersects, that's the equilibrium wage. And at that time, there is a quantity that people are willing to work. That's your quantity supplied. How much labor are people willing to work? How many hours are they willing to work at that wage? And there's a quantity demanded. So that would be how many hours are businesses willing and able, what can they afford to pay for at that wage? How much labor can they afford to hire at that wage? So that's how it works. So let's reduce this to writing for you. The equilibrium wage, and I'm going to call it, of course, W star, keep things consistent, is the market price of labor for a job. All right, so that's the equilibrium wage. Now, there's something interesting here that I want to bring up. This is a concept that I think is just so extremely important, and I want to make sure that you guys understand how important it is as well. And this is the concept of derived, oops, I misspelled it there, hang on. Derived demand, okay? So derived demand, this is another concept here. This is because this tells us where does demand for labor come from, okay? Now it could come from there's someone that wants to start a business and all those things, but why want to start a business? They start a business because they think there will be a demand. People will want to buy the product or the service that they produce. So therefore there would be a demand for the service or the product. If there is not, then there's no demand for any labor to produce it. So demand for labor in an industry is derived from, it comes from a demand for the product it produces. So if we have, let's put this down, demand for labor in an industry is derived from demand for the product it produces. Okay, so demand for labor, demand for the product it produces. Now let's look up here and let's talk about this for just a moment. All right, so up here I've had students ask me before, so why is it that a student or an individual with an MBA that's good in business, why are they paid so much less than a professional athlete, for example? Well, it's because of demand and supply. I can say that. That's where the wages come from. If you are, this is from the supply side. There are a higher number of individuals who have an MBA and can do the jobs associated with having an MBA than there are, say, quarterbacks of Peyton Manning's caliber. I refuse to say Tom Brady, Peyton Manning's. So if you look, so the supply curve would be down here, then it would be increased. It would be to the right for the MBA folks, which next to demand, you can see, in fact, we can draw that. So the supply curve would be down here for the MBAs, which would give us a different wage. So you would have your wage right here for the MBA folks, and there's your supply of labor dash. Let's do it that way. So see, there's a bigger supply. So supply is larger. On the other hand, the type of NFL quarterbacks like Peyton Manning, for example, we look at that, and let's go back here. That's going to be way back here. There's less of those, and so therefore they're going to command a much higher wage. So this is your wage for NFL right here, and this is your supply of labor dash. There we go. So you see, it's a demand and supply issue. That's where wages come from with that. And then derived demand too. So there is a higher demand. People will pay more to go see Peyton Manning play football or to see a winning team play football than they will to go and, see an NBA. But that demands a high ticket price. So therefore there's a higher derived demand as well, which can affect the demand for such skills. Whoops. All right. Change back here. Okay, so the law of demand still applies. Law of demand still applies, and what I mean by that is as the price of labor increases, then the quantity demanded of labor decreases, and vice versa. Because when there's a higher price of labor, then when there's a higher price of labor, then the demanders, the businesses, they can't necessarily afford to pay that price, okay, or to pay as much to hire as many people. So also the law of supply is also still true. So if we have the price of labor increases, then the quantity supplied of labor also increases, and vice versa. Because more people want to work when wages are up, right? More people are going to work when wages are up. Therefore, the law of supply, remember the supplies are us, so it's still true there as well. All right, so now resources tend to gravitate to their highest paid use. We knew that. So that would be like actors, can they make more money doing movies or TV shows? Or for land, where are you going to sell your land? Who's going to pay the most for it? Somebody building a stadium or somebody that just wants to build a corner store? So how we might phrase these, some of the terms we would use to define these, we might take a look at our opportunity cost again. So opportunity cost in the resource market These are the earnings of the next best alternative. All right, so that's opportunity cost. Now we're going to put some numbers here in just a second. Economic rent these would be the difference between the two. So these are the earnings above the next highest alternative. And it's also can be called the amount necessary to keep a resource in its present use. Because if a resource is earning, let's say if you're an actor on TV and you're earning $1 million an episode, and then you can do commercials for $500,000 a commercial, so your economic rent therefore would be $500,000. However, if that went away, if you lost your TV contract, or the TV people said, well, we're just going to give you $500,000 an episode, well, then you might decide that commercials are easier. You're going to go do that because your economic rent has gone down. Now, if we hear economic rents are going up, then that is just showing us how when people are making money, people are going to their highest alternative, okay? And the earnings of the next best alternative right there, your opportunity cost, of course, if you are an actor, and let's write this down so that you can, so if you are an actor and you have, you are in a, let's see, all right, so you're in a TV show at $1 million per episode, and then your next highest alternative is commercials at 500,000 each. Okay, so your opportunity cost, therefore, of doing TV shows, your opportunity cost of doing TV shows is therefore $500,000. That's your opportunity cost, because what you're giving up to do the TV shows are the commercials. All right. Now your economic rent for TV shows is also $500,000, because that's the difference between. So you're going to have TV episodes of 1 million minus commercials of 500,000. All right, so you take those, and then that equals 500,000, and that's your economic rent. Okay. So if your TV producer says, you know what, we can't pay you $1 million anymore, your show's not that popular, we're going to only pay you $500,000 for that. Well, then you might jump to doing commercials because they're easier. You can see the numbers there. If this goes down to $500,000, then your economic rent is going to be zero. You may go do something else. Who knows, right? So that's how those numbers work with that. Let's take a look at some elasticity. How does elasticity figure into this? How does elasticity figure into this? Well, if a resource is inelastic, then that means there is no alternative use for that resource, and all earnings become economic rent. So for an example might be a lawnmower. If you own a lawnmower, you can earn money by mowing lawns for people. But if you want to do something else, there's not really another use for your lawnmower. So therefore, all your earnings are economic rent. You have to make a certain amount, whatever the amount is that you choose, that you set your line and say, this is it. As long as I make this amount, I'm going to continue to mow lawns. You go below that, I want to go do something else. If a resource is elastic, then that means that the resource could earn equal pay over all alternatives. So equal pay over all alternatives. That might be something like a fast food job. If it's a minimum wage job, you know you're going to get minimum wage over all alternatives. So it would be something along those lines. And your opportunity cost of that one would be all your earnings, because your opportunity cost, the earnings of the next best alternative, they're all the same. So it's going to be all of your earnings, therefore. So that's how that works with elasticity. That's how elasticity is applied to that. Alrighty, so let's keep going. So we said that firms, we've seen the labor market, and we've looked at how the labor market looks for the industry. So let's take another look at how, so this is the labor market. Look at that again. And the first one we're going to look at, or we're going to redraw, this one is for the industry. We just looked at this one. So it's like this. And you have your, I didn't give myself enough room over there, so I have to get creative with that. All right, and we're just going to look at wages for right now. So there's your wage. Okay, so you have your W star right there. All right, and then we have our supply of labor and our demand for labor. And that's what the industry looks like. We just saw that. We're not going to worry about quantity right this moment. Okay, so we've got that. Now let's see what it looks like for individual firm. And it's going to start out looking something like this. Now the firm, on the other hand, the firm, their supply curve is a little different. So they have right here, and I drew that a little long. That's okay. So here's their demand for labor right here. Now that's what, remember, demand is what they're willing and able to purchase. So you've got right here, you've got this equilibrium wage rate. So let's, all right, normally I use a dotted line. Okay, there we go. I got my dots going there. All right. So market, the labor market has already set the price here for this job. So for the firm, we just have to see right here, what is their quantity demanded at the equilibrium wage rate? And this is it. So this is, so right here you see, where does this wage intersect with their demand curve? You can plot the wage right here on this axis and see where does it intersect on their demand curve, and that gives you your quantity demanded for labor right there. That gives you your quantity demanded for labor. So that's the hiring point. That's where they're going to hire. This is what they're willing and able to pay based on their demand. Now remember, they're basing this on their derived demand too. So this line right here, this demand curve, is going to be based on their derived demand, because they have to be able to sell the products that they made. So these firms are price takers. They're price takers. And what that means is that the market, the labor market, has already, well, we'll give you the generic definition of price takers. So this means the market has already determined price for that resource. We're going to switch price takers. We're going to apply that to the product market as well. But for right now, the market has already determined the price for that resource, so the firm is price takers. Now, the reason why they're price takers, if they don't pay the going rate, the resource is going to go to the highest alternative. They're going to go to someone who will. If they pay more, then their budget won't allow them to hire enough to meet their demand. So therefore, they just kind of, it's better for the firm. They have to take whatever is the going rate for that. Whatever is the going rate for that resource. All right, so that's how it works with the firm. Now let's go away from labor for a moment, and we're going to look at labor. We're going to switch back and look at labor from the supplier side of labor. We've been looking from the businesses side, but let's look from the supplier side as well. And so first, we're going to talk a little bit more about utility and share something interesting about that. So there are actually two sources of utility. Now, the first one we've already talked about, and that is consumption. So remember, utility is the satisfaction derived from consuming, so it is consumption. There's also a second source that is leisure. So that's our leisure time. This goes into our utility of our time utility. All right, so we have our money utility up there with consumption, but there's also the concept of time utility. Our time is worth something, isn't it? In fact, in some cases, time may be worth more than our money. You know, we use comparisons all the time, if you'll pardon that pun. So leisure is our time utility. But now also, if we get, it's just like any other good. If we get too much of it, then that's going to we're going to have diminishing utility, diminishing marginal utility there, right? Because leisure costs us. What it costs us, there's a price involved with leisure, with having leisure, and that is lost wages. We could be making money or we could be doing other things. So there is a cost involved with having leisure. But it also, there's diminishing utility. We get utility from it, but it also diminishes over time. So we can say that leisure is also subject to the law of diminishing, there we go, marginal utility. So it's also subject to the law of diminishing marginal utility. Now, if you have trouble buying that one might be a hard sell, because you may say, well, I have not enjoyed enough leisure that I can say that I've reached that point. But the truth is, you really can. I mean, imagine somebody that's been out of work for a while. My own daughter, her school is on the quarter system, which means she doesn't go back till mid-September, when all of her friends are going back at the 1st of August. So she's sitting around with nothing to do, no one to do it with. And definitely it gets boring. So there is a law of diminishing marginal utility. Leisure, you can't just do leisure all the time. Okay. So there's also 3 allocations of your time. There's 3 ways that you can spend your time. So the first one is what we've been talking about, and this is market work. Market work is just, it's your labor, which is bought and sold in the labor market. So your labor right there, when you're working a job and earning money for it, then that's market work. So you get paid for this one. Second one is your non-market work. So your non-market work, these are your unpaid efforts. Unpaid efforts. So this is work that you're doing, but you're not getting a paycheck for. So these would be things like right now, getting an education. What you're doing right now is your unpaid, is non-market work. Volunteering, cleaning your house or washing your clothes, things like that is things that count as work, but you don't get a paycheck for them. And finally, what we were just talking about, leisure is the other one. And leisure is your fun, non-work activities. There you go. All right, so your fun work activities, that is your leisure. Now, there's some other concepts. So we talk about diminishing marginal utility. it can go even stronger than that. It can reach a realm called disutility. And disutility is the opposite of utility. It's dissatisfaction with something. So if you have reached the point of disutility, then it's not just that you're getting diminishing satisfaction, it's that you are actually achieving dissatisfaction. You are dissatisfied. It's not that just that you like something a little less than you did before, it's that you actually don't like it at all. Like, for example, I remember working a job where I had to drive to Atlanta, and I remember distinctly driving along thinking, okay, I could go on into work, or I could plow my car into this median right here in the highway and see what happens. And quite frankly, either one sounded equally good to me. Have you been there? Can you sympathize with me on that one? I bet you have. So disutility. So that's when you're just dissatisfied. So when you have a job, when you're getting burnt out on your job or your non-market work or something along those lines, you can have something called increasing marginal disutility. Okay? And this is when the more you work, the less fun it becomes. So this ties into when you get burnt out. You're just burnt out on your job. You just really don't want to do it at all. So the more you work, the less fun it becomes. You're just a workaholic. And what's actually wrong with you at that point is that you don't have balance in your life. So you can have too much leisure or too much market work. You can really have too much non-market work too, but it's more likely somebody's going to have too much leisure or too much market work. And then that's going to get them into these areas of disutility, diminished marginal utility, and they're just not going to enjoy their life. So consumers, we want to maximize our consumption, our utility from consumption, but also we want to maximize our time utility. So it's going to look something like this. All right, so you have your marginal utility. Well, let me type it out and then we'll go over it. And then one more. Okay, so what I have here, what I've written down, you can see I have your marginal utility from your market work equal to your marginal utility from your non-market work equal to marginal utility from your leisure activities. So marginal utility, of course, being the last unit of time you're spending on each utility, on each activity, you want that to be sort of equal. So you want to enjoy each three allocations of your time equally. So, and here's your life coaching part. If you are unhappy, if you are dissatisfied with your job, dissatisfied, if you're bored with your life, if you're not having fun or something's just not right, check your balance. Perhaps you might not be balanced. Maybe you're sitting around too much doing nothing. You need to get out and do some things. Maybe even if it doesn't mean getting a job, perhaps it might mean doing some non-market work. You're volunteering or something, or doing it yourself projects or something like that. Get a hobby. Or maybe you're taking too many classes this semester. Perhaps you've overloaded your class schedule, so therefore you're short on money. You need some market work, get some pay coming in, something that you feel like you're being paid for, that you're getting a benefit to. Because I get it, you're learning, and school, you learn things from school, but there's also, it takes time to realize the benefits that you hope to achieve from this. So I get that. Or then your leisure, perhaps you're sitting around bored, you're doing nothing. Maybe your non-market work, you're too busy with school or whatnot. You might need a day off or something along those lines. So that's your life coaching part. You need to make sure that you get a balance in everything. All right. So it's easy to know. Let's look a little bit about some motivation for these decisions. So it's easy to calculate the opportunity cost for your leisure and non-market market work, right? It's easy to calculate that cost because it is your wages, right? Whatever you make, because if you're doing things that are unpaid, then you're sacrificing doing things that you can get paid for. So therefore, you can say that if your wages increase, then the opportunity cost of labor also increases. So I have there OCL, opportunity cost of labor, also increases. So if your wages go up, then your opportunity cost is going up. Easy peasy to figure that one out. So therefore, what you would do is when your wages go up, your opportunity cost of skipping work goes up. So you're going to feel like you need to work more. You're going to want to work more hours. So this is called, so you substitute, so therefore wages increase. Let's see that. So then work is substituted for leisure as wages increase. What this also means is that the quantity supplied of labor increases. So people are wanting to work more hours. So they're supplying more labor. They're substituting work for leisure as their wages go up. This is called, this is substitution effect of increasing wages. All right, so this is the substitution effect of increasing wages. You tend to substitute, as your wages go up, you tend to substitute leisure, work for leisure. Now, also, let's take a look. We can say, so leisure can be defined as a normal good. Now, let's see why that is. Leisure is a normal good because we derive utility from it and there is a price attached, and that price is your wages. If you take a day off, you're not getting paid. So leisure is a normal good. We derive utility from it, and there's a price attached. So therefore, as wages increase, then you know your demand for normal goods increases, and therefore, again, your demand for leisure increases. So as your wages increase, your demand for normal goods increases. We know that. We discussed that and we saw how that's true. So therefore, if leisure is a normal good, then your demand for leisure also increases. So what we're looking at here, this is like those if A equals B and B equals C, then A must equal C. It's one of those types of problems, but that is actually the case. So as your wages increase, normal goods demand and also leisure, demand for leisure increases. What we're saying here is that you reach the point where you say, I'm making so much money I can afford to take a day off. And you've also been working your butt off with the substitution effect. So this is called the income effect of increasing wages. So this is your income effect right here. Now let's see what it looks like. Oh, and also with this, one more thing here. This is when your quantity supplied of labor might decrease. So let's see what it looks like on a graph. All right, so we're going to see what it looks like on a graph. So it would look like this is your own personal supply of labor. So we have here, we have our wages on this axis, and right here, this is your quantity of labor right there. All right, so your supply curve. So you're going to start here and you're hired for a wage. And as your wage goes up, you see your quantity of labor right here is going up. So as your wage goes up, you're working more hours. So here goes that wage up. And you continue to work more hours and your quantity of labor is going up. Then, look at that. You're going to reach the point where you're going to say, you know what, I hadn't had a day off in a while and I can afford to take a day off. So you're going to do that right there. So it shifts around at that point. So what you've got right here, you're looking and your wages keep going up. And we have our arrows because we see they keep going up. And as they do, our quantity supplied of labor also keeps going up like that. And so what we've got here is we've got let's see if I can draw it for you. So we've got the wages going up and our quantity, woo, that's a huge Q, isn't it? Quantity supplied of labor also going up. Hey, it's not perfect, but I made my point, right? So right there, at this point, where we are right here, we've got that going on, and we have the substitution effect is going on right there. So that's what we've got going on right here, and it'll continue to do that. So I'll make those little arrows again. So it continues on, all your wages are going up. But then your wages keep going up, and it's gone up higher and higher, and now you're at the point, so this other wage right here comes into play. Let's mark it in green. And so it comes into play. All right, so that wasn't a straight line, but you see what I mean. It comes into play right here. So we're going to call this one W1. All right. So then at W1, you look and you still have your wages are still going up, but at this point you say, you know what, I can afford to take some time off. I'm making enough money working just a regular hour week that I can afford to take time off because my wages. So you've got right here, you've got your wages are still going up. So your wages are still going up, but at that point, I'm not going to write another Q like that. Your quantity supplied of labor you're willing to supply less labor, so that's going down. So you see right here, you've turned a curve. There's this wage, and it's different for everybody, where you're looking at it and you're going to say, that's different for me. I don't feel like So you reach that point right up here. Until that point, you're continuing, you're enjoying the extra wages, and so you want to make the money. Then you reach a point, this wage, where you're like, okay, I've made it, I'm good, and so I can work less. So what we would say for that is at W1, the income effect dominates the substitution effect. All right, so right here, you have the income effect taking over. So you have the income effect taking over, and it continues out that way. So that's what that looks like. Now, there's some other influences that might contribute to this. For example, you may have other sources of income. You may have, you may get some help along the way, or some grant money, or something along those lines. Perhaps it's the quality of your work environment. You may hate it or love it, or somewhere along there. Your tastes and preferences. Maybe you have a job right now that you don't like, but in the future, you're going to get another one once you finish your education, or perhaps it's something that now you have a job that you just love. So you keep wanting to add more and more and more, but you got to be careful because eventually you hit the point of disutility. So there's all kinds of factors that might go into influencing your behavior, but for the average person, this is it. This is how it looks. All right. So this is the first part of the resource markets that we've talked about. And this is kind of introducing us to the concept. It's showing us how things behave from the supply and the demand side. Just gives them a brief overview right there and teaches you a few principles and theories involved with that. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is, and we're not going to do that on this lesson. We're going to wrap this one up right here. But when we come back, we're going to talk about minimum wage and labor unions and things that, as examples of things that might throw the labor market into disequilibrium. So we look right now at equilibrium markets and how that works. So next time we're going to look at some disequilibrium examples and see what are the economic effects of that. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're finding this enlightening, because it is at this point all about you. You know, talking about the labor market and why you're actually here, right? To learn, but also to translate that learning into some future earnings for you. And I'm going to stop before I continue to make some more bad rhymes and you get mad at me and don't want to tune in anymore. So you all have a good rest of your day, evening, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Don't know when you're watching this, but I hope you're having a good time wherever you are. Take care.